Who was giving the lecture in the real Frankenstein? Who was the...
I don't, in the original movie.
The original, everybody's looking at me.
Well, yeah, it's what we brought you guys in here for.
Yeah,
we don't know anything about this
and
movie.
I can see the
We're
guy
clueless.
now. He does the intro at the beginning of the film. It's
Yes, that's him.
It's somebody, yeah.
the Waldman, Dr.
But
right out of my head.
Was he
parallels
a Tolstoy?
Professor Little Old Man? No, Little
he
Old
is.
Man. Little Old Man.
He plays Van Helsing in Dracula.
We're going to have to look it up. Frankenstein.
No, and I know someone's yelling at their computer or phone right now because they know.
Well, we're not live.
Waldman? No, because
We're
they're
not
listening.
live.
No, they're listening.
I'm not going to make it sound like we're freaking retarded.
Oh, okay.
We're going to sound...
Well,
we're gonna sound,
yeah.
well...
I think it is Waldman.
There's only so much you can do.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. We are in the midst of Season 1, dedicated to reanimating young Frankenstein. I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm Walt Murray.
And our guests today are no strangers to making the old seem relevant. The stars of BK on the Air. BK and... Oh, actually, it's Barry King and Commander Mike... Wait, God damn it.
BK's fine. BK's fine. All right, let's see how many times we have to stop.
I told you this is going to suck.
We've done it once already.
So, I'm going to try it again. Give me a second. That may be a that may be an extra open.
That may be.
All right, let's try that again. All right, give a little dead pause. And our guests today are no strangers to making the old seem relevant. The stars of BK on the Air, Barry King and Mike Clark. At least that's their titles by day, but by night they become the Cape Crusader team of BK and Commander Clark. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here.
Great to have you guys with us on this. Well, where we are, actually, we're not in the castle, but we will get there by the end of the week. We are actually just outside of the Brain Depositary, which we talked about, Walt, last week. It's you can spell it that way, and technically it can go depository or Terry, but it's interesting that it's spelled wrong in some people's minds here.
Yeah, and I don't remember what we were saying last week. Depositary. What was the difference between those two?
So something about somebody who is trusted in the legal firm or in a legal profession to hand out or be trusted with money. A depositary.
Right. So they were entrusted with the brains.
Yeah,
Never heard that before.
It's the brain trust.
Wow.
And if you say suppository, you're completely wrong.
Yes.
Sometimes
don't
it's
mix
very
up your
similar.
suppository with your depositary.
Totally different end.
Okay. Well, some people, that's maybe where they can find their brain.
Absolutely.
It's like, hey, where'd I put my head? It's shoved right up your...
Suppository.
Take your suppositories so we can make a depositary.
Exactly.
Well, we start off this minute where we last left last week on Friday with a hand coming through the door to unlock their way into the depositary. And that's where we continue on and we realize it is Igor breaking his way into the Brain Depositary. And we will end this minute with a really poor decision on Igor's part.
Yes, we will. That is, yeah, it is. It is a great decision, but a poor decision.
So at the very start of the minute, we've got the hand still opening or coming through the door, and the first gag we get is Marty Feldman doing a wonderful bit where he sees his own hand thinking it's somebody else's hand, and he's almost startled to leave.
Yeah, the most ridiculous jump scare of the whole film.
And a great sign on the door that says, drop off the brains after 5 through the slot.
Of course, through the slot.
Door, kind of like your keys when you drop them off at the mechanic shop, when you get your car fixed. There's a
So I
slot
guess it's
for the
after
brains.
5 when he's getting there.
Well, after 5, yeah.
Well, we talked about this a little bit last week when we saw the little tiny area. Apparently, what happens if more than one brain gets deposited overnight? I guess... Well, an accident waiting to happen.
I hope they're not in the glass jars because when they fall through, they're going to break when they hit the floor.
But
I don't know.
It makes you wonder, do they deposit the brains in the glass jars, or is that the service at the Brain Depositary after you've deposited just the raw brain?
I never thought of that.
Well, I would think it'd be a service afterwards. Otherwise, there'd be a pile of brains and glass.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think you provide your own, serving
Why
dish.
are these people walking around with brains?
Well, we talked
Where are
about
they
this.
getting these
I
brains?
wonder if this is right next door to Bob's Deadheads.
This is true. It could be right next to Bob's. They stop, grab a brain.
Yeah, well, think about it. I bet this is Bob's extension, because once you have the heads, where people are collecting the 2-year dead head, the 3-year dead head to put on display in your particular castle, why keep the brain in the head at that point?
That's a good point. Just drop it off next door.
Right. You've diversified.
Absolutely. And
Yeah, but think of the paperwork, because you'd have to have whose brain it is, probably some pros of the brain, cons of the brain. Any mounted
cons of the brain.
Cons of the brain.
Hardly used.
Hardly used.
I never even thought about that. What
Tumors.
kind of a form are you supposed to fill out when you're dropping the brain off after hours? And how do you make sure? Do you pin it to the brain to make sure
Is it tape?
it doesn't swap to
Brain
other
tag.
brains?
There's a brain tag. A fine line of washers and dryers as well. Hey, you said get silly.
Brain tag. Oh my god! And there's a poor guy in the corner. Nobody ever needs to call on me.
No.
All right, Larry mixed up the brain tags again.
I know how to install the brains, but nobody ever asks my opinion.
And I guess, and we said too, special container.
Yes.
There must be the brain container emporium in town.
You're right next door to the homemade baked cakes.
Yes.
Can you believe some moron used a Ziploc bag again?
We told them plastic contaminates the organic material. Glass, people.
Yes.
Well, as we make our way in, I think one of the next gags, and this is all Marty Feldman. We should just say that up front. This whole minute is nothing but Marty Feldman and not a word of dialogue. After he realizes it's his own hand, he has to physically push his hand back through the little deposit gate as if he can't pull it out on his own. He shoves it with his fingers on the other side.
Yeah, and then he closes the door and shushes the door.
Yes.
Well, is this the first scene that Marty Feldman is in by himself in this movie?
Yes.
I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
This is all him. Yeah, in fact, he shushes the room
Yeah.
and then makes sure the people behind him realize, okay, there's nobody really there. Never mind.
And Hans Delbruk, scientist and saint, the brain that he looks at, he was a real-life Hans Delbruk, was a 19th century German military historian, believe it or not.
Yes.
And I guess you guys probably knew that. But I thought, and then the name of the third brain, where Igor makes his selection, is that of Assistant Property Master Charles Saraton. It was part of the crew of the movie. So,
But apparently he didn't know that his name was in there for years.
He didn't know, so he's lost his brain because he's part of the crew on this movie. So his brain is gone.
Well, you know what's
I thought
crazy
that was
is
funny.
you can actually buy 3 of Hans Delbruk's books on Amazon right now.
Really?
Yeah,
sweet.
he's got Warfare and Antiquity for $35.
That's awesome.
Medieval Warfare for $45 and Dawn of Modern Warfare for $36. So you can get the whole set.
But how many stars?
And that,
I gave him all
What's the
5.
rating?
Yeah, what's the rating?
and that one book he didn't finish called How Not to Lose Your Mind. Right? Poor Hans.
A man whose brain is shelved.
That's right. Now, looking at how this scene is shot, which is like a lot of the other shots of Young Frankenstein, I first saw the movie when it was, I think it was 1981. It premiered on NBC. And I've talked to Walt about this. If you watch Young Frankenstein with the sound off, other than just a few scenes of maybe Marty Feldman mugging for the camera and stuff like that, the movie looks like a classic horror film. If you weren't listening to it, you could think it was an actual horror film, not a comedy or a parody of horror film of the past, which it kind of is. But it never insults Frankenstein at all. They took with great care to make it the way it is, and I think that's part of the success of the movie is the way it dealt with it's fun. It's a funny homage to Frankenstein. Is exactly what it is. They never once insulted the film. The original Frankenstein, which I thought was great.
No, I agree with that. No, it looks like a film right from the 30s.
I don't think it would have been as successful had they really poked fun at Frankenstein and really just jabbed at it.
Oh,
and
yeah,
made it
no.
over the top.
I think that's one of the problems with Dracula Dead and Loving It. A later one, they try to kind of do the same thing, and it doesn't work. One, it's in color, but two, they make more, they're like putting down the genre instead of, paying tribute to it.
One of the things we talked about with our other guests, which is funny, you guys are saying some of the exact same things across these many minutes that other guests have noted about the reverence to the material, that on its own, it's a good monster movie.
Yes.
It is.
It's also a good comedy. It's not a silly monster movie trying to be a comedy or a comedy trying to be a silly monster movie. It is a really good, well-filmed, told monster movie that is also a good comedy. And so because you've got the two equal in weight, it makes for a much bigger, it's sort of like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
And when they mention in the film this has happened 4 times before, in my mind, sometimes I decide what's canon, and I'm like, this could be part of the Frankenstein movie.
Oh, yeah. No, I think it is.
This
it is
a
as far as I'm concerned.
to those films, even though I don't know what hoops you guys may know what hoops Warner Brothers had to go through to not get sued by Universal for making this movie, because Universal owns Frankenstein, the movie versions and whatnot. To make this, there is a lot of Frankenstein in this. They even used the equipment by Ken
Strickfaden.
Ken Strickfaden.
Faden or Fadden?
I call it Faden, but it could be Fadden.
All the equipment.
I was not around to get an audible interview with his name, so I don't know.
I just call him Big Ken.
Big Ken.
Yeah.
Big Ken in his
Call him
garage.
lightning bolt.
Yeah.
But this movie is very much like Frankenstein, and I guess he didn't have any legal problems over it. I never heard of anything.
Well, I don't know what happened between the studios, because this was actually, it started at Columbia Pictures, but ended up at 20th Century Fox, as we've talked before, as a result of Columbia Pictures.
Fox, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Columbia Pictures wanted to only give $2.5 million, not even $1.75 million, and they wouldn't let him shoot in black and white. He went over to Alan Ladd Jr., who had just taken over at 20th Century Fox, and he said, we'll give you $3 million, but we kind of still want you to film in color, and we'll just release it in black and white. And he said, no, not falling for that one. And then so they did film it in black and white. What I did find interesting here, you were talking about making it like a monster movie, how similar this actually was in this scene to the original 1931 picture when Fritz was breaking into the lecture hall. And remember, there wasn't an Igor. That didn't come until Son of Frankenstein. Right. But the guy that was tasked to getting the brain, we had the lecture going on in the original 1931 movie with Dr. Waldman talking to the students. You can see the different textures of a normal brain and the abnormal brain. And then Fritz comes in the middle of a dark lecture hall and gets startled by the skeleton dangling in the classroom and drops the right brain. So he settles for the other one. There's no label. We only know watching it because the professor was very specific about saying, look at how you see the formation of the brain tissue is not nearly as advanced in the abnormal brain versus the normal brain. Fritz just grabs the other one thinking, well, it's
just a brain.
Yeah, it's just a brain. Brain's a brain. And in this case, we've got Igor, who can't apparently read. Well, maybe somewhat. Maybe. But he doesn't pay close attention.
Well, he doesn't, because it's Abby normal.
Right. Well, he just call it an Abby something. But he also doesn't read specifically the words underneath, do not use this brain.
And what would you possibly be using a brain for outside of a body?
That just opens so many questions.
Yes.
I mean, how many other people around town are...
Do not use.
Just before we come into the close-up shot of him deciding, and we're going to get to him dropping the brain and all the silliness there, but since we're talking about the similarities of these two scenes between the original 1931 Frankenstein and this, if you look at the shot before he drops the first brain in the mirror, behind him are shelves and rows of brains under glass.
Just all over the place.
I mean, apparently everyone who's died in this village has their brain transported to the university.
Transylvania's got issues.
Mm-hmm. They really, really do.
So he doesn't even bother to look for any other brain. He doesn't bother to read the specific tag that says, do not use this brain. He goes right for it because, well, it's convenient right here, right where I just was.
Exactly.
Yeah. Transylvania's got issues. That should be what it says on the city limits sign.
Yes.
When they come to Transylvania. Transylvania, we have issues.
We have issues.
That's true. Because Transylvania's got a lot of trouble.
Yeah, weird lightning that goes off inside or outside at inconvenient times. We've got a brain store. We've got guys that deliver heads.
The evil henchman outlet. You know, henchmen are us.
Henchmen are us. We got moving humps from one shoulder to the other.
Well, only when it's convenient or after dark.
Only when it's convenient.
Right. Didn't he say that at one of his interviews? Only after dark.
Yeah.
Well, Marty Feldman, funny in his own right, he's missed by a lot of people, especially by Mel, because I've read and heard that Mel talk about how to this day Marty and Marty's wife, Mel and Marty's wife, miss him very much to this day. He used to have in-depth conversations with Marty Feldman, Mel Brooks did, about jazz and jazz musicians, of all things that they could talk about. That's what they would love talking about. So just in the research and the things that we found out about, that's what we discovered.
All right, so here's an interesting note to go along with Mel Brooks. You were just talking talking about BK. Did you realize all the handwriting on the jars that we see, that is actually Mel Brooks's handwriting. He put the labels on for all of these brains beforehand. So nobody knew he was doing it, and even didn't know what he was going to specifically label these. He just labeled them all, including, as you said earlier, slipping in the name of one of the crew members on the other brain.
One of Gene Wilder's stipulations for being in the film is that Mel not be in it. But Mel was be damned. He was going to be in it one way or the other. His handwriting,
his fingerprints,
his narration as Frankenstein
Yes.
earlier in the film. So yeah,
We've had our two of at least 3 confirmed Mel Brooks sightings in this. Now, the handwriting, I guess, technically would be 4, but he doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
But his voice is in here 3 times.
Oh, yeah.
We've documented the first 2. He's the werewolf howl at the when
Right.
the hair cart's coming into the castle von Frankenstein, and he's the sound of the voiceover that we hear when we do the slow pan over the dusty, cobwebbed laboratory that they discover Inga, Dr. Frankenstein, and Igor, and you hear almost a recreation of the Victor Frankenstein, almost as if the ghost of his voice is still playing in this room. That's Mel Brooks. And we'll have one more coming up
Right. Don't know if you want to jump ahead on that one, but
Yeah.
I know the one you're talking about coming up. There's a certain dot game that will happen later on in the film.
Yes.
That's right. So now when Marty Feldman drops his brain, we actually be seeing it right here in this scene. When he drops the brain, in the original script, now I sent you an original script. I don't know if you got that draft or not. It's a Gene Wilder early version, first version of the script.
I don't have the first. I've got the third one that was blessed by the studio with the final rewrites.
I sent you what I think is the first draft. You've got that too if you ever want to look at it. It's interesting. He was originally supposed to say after he dropped the brain, he was supposed to mug the camera and go, "Funny thing is, I tried." Right.
Yes.
And that would have been, I guess, funny, but I think it works funnier just the way it is
I
right
think-
now.
yeah.
Because things are, as we know, they're edited out and changed for a reason in the movie because it didn't work as well.
Well, and
So I
this
thought
scene does not need any dialogue.
No.
I think anything like that would have maybe slowed it down or diffused some of the humor.
We've kind of talked about this, and I would be interested to hear what y'all think. There was a lot cut out of this movie. They nearly did double the amount of work, and I think that the editors were geniuses. They really caught the lightning here, and they don't go off into too much extraneous stuff. The jokes are tight.
Well, wasn't there a quote? One of them said, like, for every 4 jokes, 3 didn't work and 1 did.
Yeah,
and they
for
kept
every
the
3 that failed, they kept the one.
They kept the 1. Okay.
Yeah, officially, this was close to twice as long as the film we have.
Yeah. See,
The first cut, and actually, we talked to Walt very early on, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks were in a room and almost felt like they had a disaster. They were just like their hearts sank. And they decided on a marathon editing session, and that was sort of the thing. If the joke didn't work, rip it out, and we'll try to figure out how to kludge the story around it. But it was more about making sure they kept the jokes that worked, and hopefully that there was enough left. And honestly, they did so much film work, they had enough to put a movie together, because we are still talking about it today.
Now, over repeated viewings of this movie, which I know that we have since it came out, and like I said, I didn't see this film until 81 on NBC when it came on one night. That's the first time I saw it. I didn't see it in 74 was the release date?
74, December of 74.
I wasn't able to see it. I wasn't old enough, so I couldn't get to the theater to see it. But I saw it later on network television. And subsequent viewings over the years, talk about editing, nothing seems to be missing from this movie. Sometimes you can spot an edit. Sometimes, or something where something doesn't flow quite right. This movie flows together wonderfully. I love it.
It does. And it's another movie that every time I watch it, I see something new. Like you're pointing out the brains. I'm like, oh, I never really noticed that back there before. Until I saw it a minute at a time, which was kind of cool.
And when I saw it that night, it was late. It was late at night. And I wasn't a little tiny kid in 1981. But watching it, the very first shot of the movie, as they've covered already, is that pan around of the coffin in the living room of the castle. And it just flips open. And that scared me when I was a kid. Because I didn't know I didn't see them getting credits, and I didn't know what this movie was. I'm like, what is this? And I liked old horror films. So I'm like, what is this coming out? The coffin opened. There's a skeletal face. And it's kind of a shock.
Well, and all I need to know is
it
it was Frankenstein. And I've loved all the old Universal movies. So I had to watch. I may have seen that same broadcast you did because I didn't see it in the theater either.
And then I've seen it reran on different late night
the DVD,
stuff. But
the Blu-ray.
It's a horror film comedy, but I didn't know that's what it was when I first started watching it for the first time.
Oh, and then for a little kid, it has some good scares in it.
It has some scary parts.
No, even this lightning in this scene we're talking about now, and
Cloris Leachman's wart is scary as hell.
Oh yeah.
in its own, I mean, in its own way.
One of the things we've mentioned before, and this is the first time we've had you guys with us on our journey through this film 1 minute at a time, is the way it's edited, the way it's written, the way it's filmed, is that pendulum swings and does it so delicately between let's head to a horror moment, let's head to a comedic moment, but it never lets us forget that we're both at the same time. Yes. And so you never know what's coming. Is what's coming next the jump scare, the lightning, the fright, or is it the joke? And I think that keeps you on the edge of your seat through the whole watching.
And having that pendulum swing that way in this movie, which you're right, it does, that is wonderful writing, directing, and acting. That's people that put that together to do that. And then Mel Brooks, I guess since he's the director, Gene Wilder wrote it and came up with it. That shows. Those are two talented guys. Because as you said, Mel didn't have a huge hit before this movie. Wasn't this his first big kind of a hit?
Blazing Saddles came out earlier in 1974, and it was a huge hit while they were still in the editing of this film. But while they were filming in 1973... Oh, actually, they were working on the script and filming early 1973.
Right.
Blazing Saddles, they didn't know if it was going to be a hit yet.
So Mel wasn't the directorial legend.
No, everyone was like keeping an eye on him.
He wasn't Mel Brooks.
Right.
He was just Mel Brooks.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And after this movie, he was able to go, I want to do the movie I want. And they said, absolutely, Mr. Brooks.
Yes.
Before it was like,
do
are you
whatever
sure?
you want to
Maybe
do.
not.
And here's a truckload of money in your driveway.
Right. Do you realize this movie here, I think, grossed a little over $80 million in its run, which converted for today's currency was a $300 million blockbuster.
Wow.
They spent
That's amazing.
$3 million making it and made over $83 million on the backside.
And they continue to make money today on resales of video and rebroadcast.
Merchandising. There was a line of figures they did based on it.
And it's incredible. The staying power of this movie. And unfortunately, it's not on Netflix or any other streaming service that I can find right now.
You told me that today. And at the time of this recording of this podcast, you also said that none of the Frankenstein films in general
I can't find any of them.
Because it's making you look back on Frankenstein now after getting in depth into this film. Some of the other versions of Frankenstein.
Yeah, and I found kind of a, bootleg version online of the 1931, and I was watching that this week. And there, it's funny talking about, is this a horror movie, is this a comedy? There are also some comedic moments in the 1931 Frankenstein. So it is much more a monster movie, horror movie with a couple comedic moments, but you kind of realize this is almost like the perfect meld of the two.
How much different? I have a question. I said I could ask you a question. How much different do you guys think this movie would have been had Mel been in it? And who would Mel have played in this had Mel been in it?
We've chatted a little bit about this. I think personally it's the best decision that was made for this particular film because Mel always plays sort of the two-dimensional goofball. Like almost you recognize he's a cardboard cutout to be mocked in the movie, whatever he's playing, except for maybe High Anxiety since he was the star of that. But all of the cameo parts that he's ever played, it's almost like, okay, here comes a goofball moment where it's Mel Brooks breaking the story, breaking the flow, adding some funny jokes, but it breaks the movie. And I think that's what would have happened here.
And that's why Gene did not want him in it. He goes, well, you're gonna mug the camera. You're going to, little did he know Marty was going to do that, but you're going to kind of, your ego's going to take over and you're going to be Mel Brooks in it and stuff, and he didn't want him in it. I'm just wondering who would Mel have played in this had he wanted to be in it? Because Mel, how many movies of Mel that Mel directed is he in? Is this the only one that he's not in?
This is the only one that I'm aware of that he's not on.
I remember him not being in another one of his films.
I think the only role that I could see him playing because of the size of it and the ability to change it completely from what it is today is the blind man. The creature meeting the blind man in the forest.
Right.
That's a perfect Mel Brooks where he would throw a merchandising comment. He would do something stupid.
Shows up
for
and
the
then
scene.
He's gone.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah.
But instead we got Gene Hackman. It was just
which
fantastic.
was brilliant.
Which I
It was
didn't know
amazing.
He was completely disappeared.
Absolutely amazing.
I guess it would have been
Spoiler alert.
It's a later scene.
Sorry.
Stay tuned for Gene
You
Hackman.
haven't seen this movie. Why are you listening to this podcast?
You'd be surprised the people we are meeting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's funny. I didn't know
There was one of our female members of the listener group who said, I had never watched this movie, but but I like Gene Wilder, but for whatever reason, I had never seen this movie. So I went to go watch it to get ready for the podcast, and I laughed myself silly.
Oh, that's awesome.
When I refamiliarized myself with it this week just to make sure, like you're going to run a marathon, you need to warm up a little bit.
Well, yeah, you got to do a few laps.
Right. Watched it all the way through, and my wife was in the living room with me, and she goes, "I want to tell you something." I'm like, "What? You're leaving me?" She's like, "No." She said,
"About time."
Every time she does that, I always think something's wrong.
Well, here it is.
That's the first.
We knew this was coming.
Just go like off the scale.
Yes, I'm going to the store and back. But
it's like the dog when the hair rises on the back. Like, what?
Lucky I've kept the attorney on retainer.
That is the first time I've seen Young Frankenstein all the way through. Now, she's seen the whole film, but she's never watched it from beginning to end.
This is one you got to watch all together.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how can you stop?
I think the first time my wife ever watched it was with me, not long after we got married, and I think she was kind of the same way that her brother had watched it, and she knew some of the jokes. And then when she sits down and goes start to finish, it has a whole different feel to it.
Yeah, that's kind of how movies are supposed to be watched.
No, they're supposed to be watched 1 minute at a time.
Well, as opposed to how movies are made today, there's so many jokes that sometimes don't even play out till 2, 3, 4 minutes down the road. You may forget if you're walking in and out of the room why the next line is funny. The whole puts the candle back. We've got so many things that happen minutes later, and you got to watch it all in once.
And a lot of comedic people would do that. You pointed out not too long ago on the radio when we were talking about Monty Python once, that Monty Python would make a joke in their television show, then 3 or 4 skits down the road, that joke would be in the background still running. Right. So, just got to keep up with it.
Well, and too, it's funny looking back that when this movie came out, you couldn't look on your phone or go home and look on Google and go, who the heck is Hans Delbruk?
We didn't have those distractions.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah. So there was no way to, I mean, like, we were talking early on, there's the Chattanooga Choo-Choo joke.
Yeah.
I knew there was a joke there, and I could not get my arms around what that was. So I had to Google the line, and I was like, oh, the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. Gotcha.
Track 29.
Track 29.
Yep. Right. Yeah. And so it's funny because we both came to that from different places. He Googled it. I had found a copy of the script, and somehow seeing the words made it click more than hearing the words.
Right.
So as soon as I started, like, oh my God, he's doing the Chattanooga Choo-Choo.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, and there are a lot of those that, I mean, nobody would know. I mean, I would assume not many people would know who Hans Delbruk was at the time.
No, I did. I wouldn't.
We sure don't
as a kid, when I saw it for the first time, I didn't know that. I didn't get half of. Thank goodness for the internet and us loving movies the way we do and investigate these things and prepare for these podcasts and radio shows and stuff that we do.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's the same as the couple has the conversation on the train in English, and then the same exact conversation in German. I didn't know that.
Train jumped the ocean.
I know.
It just kept going.
Well, and both of those too also play to Mel Brooks' love-hate relationship with all things German.
Right. Well, it is love-hate.
It is a love-hate relationship.
Yes.
Don Rickles had a love-hate with that, too.
Yes, he did.
Now, you guys had you guys covered the movie before this, by the way, from the beginning credits all the way up to now. You guys went through the scene of the train ride and whatnot. Did you guys get a chance to bring up it's either the conductor or the engineer actor? Was the Chef Boyardee guy on the Chef Boyardee cans?
What? Did not know that.
Oh wow!
It's the same man. It's Chef Boyardee. The guy who is Chef Boyardee was actually playing. I can't remember if it's the conductor.
It's got to be the English conductor.
The conductor is the same guy that Mr. Chef.
That is
Boyardee.
Crazy. I thought he was Italian.
Confirmed that too.
Wait. Is it the guy on the platform when he says all aboard and Elizabeth goes, I detest that man. And we're like, you haven't even met this man. He's doing his job. What's wrong with you?
Maybe she hates Chef Boyardee.
Maybe that's what it is.
One of those guys.
That's what it is. It all makes sense now. Elizabeth hates Chef Boyardee.
I got bad ravioli.
Chef Boyardee's face is burned into my memory for those cans. You know him when you see him. That stupid hat.
That son of a bitch and his mini raviolis.
One of them was empty. There was no meat.
I detest that man. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
not enough sauce in your
I know,
ravioli.
you told me. How many times do we have to go through this again?
Let it go.
Doctor, you haven't even touched your Chef Boyardee yet.
Oh, maybe that's why he does what he does. He's so sick of being harangued by Elizabeth.
Oh, that's great.
How did he not know he was in a failed relationship from the platform?
No.
Well, a
I
woman
think he
who
knew.
hates Chef Boyardee.
I don't think he did. We talk about it. He is head over heels into her. There is no, because look at, even with somebody as hot as Inga, besides just the one misunderstanding when she first meets him and says, "You want to roll in the hay?" And he looks like, "Wait, what are you propositioning?" And then she starts singing. He's like, innocent. "Oh, okay." And from that point on, he's always been sort of a mentor. He's always like protecting her, holding her, never thinks of her in that way. Not until,
I don't know. What's a minute that's coming up? Elevate me, and he's
not him.
Here, doctor.
Not him. Her.
Well,
he doesn't. I think. Well, you know what? We'll have to wait till we.
Yes, we will.
I think
that's a tease.
I think he is so head over heels into Elizabeth, and here it's all about his work. It's about the exploration, the science, finding the lab, trying to figure out what's going on. He's not figuring, because I mean, I don't know if Terry Garr woke me up from a dream in the middle of the night. I'm like, let's get back to sleep. I'm.
But I'm bummed.
We're gonna play a little Posturepedic polka before we go digging around we're not digging around the castle. Well, at that time, if I'm single,
that one. I'm gonna steal that one.
You may use that at will. You send me the royalty check.
That'll be the name of my autobiography.
Well, as we're making our way to the end of this minute, where we've got Igor making the horrible decision of all the brains possible. He's grabbing the one specifically says, "Do not use this brain." Abnormal. He walks out with it, and we do cut to the scene as the camera starts to come in from what we obviously is the lab, and it looks like everything is up and running.
Yep.
Well, let me say this before we get to the end of this scene. Thank you for at least having us here to talk about scenes starting with scene 41 through 45 that we're going to examine, because God knows they could have brought us in to talk about either the beginning credits or the end credits, and that would have been boring.
Oh, yeah, we need you back for the end credits.
We're here for 41 and 40 through 45. That's some of the best scenes.
Some of the best stuff.
Oh, yeah.
They really are.
It's the meat of the fruit.
The credits were so bad, we almost didn't show up for them. We were just going to do, we're going to borrow from our friend Sean German 5 minutes of mime. We were going to just insert, and here comes the opening credits. Let it sit there for 2 minutes, and there we go. Next minute tomorrow.
It's the beginning of the film. You guys could be crunching on popcorn, everything crunching and stuff.
Oh, that's amazing.
Butter.
But instead, we got that gem out of there that all of Inga's clothes were made by her mom,
Phyllis Garr.
Right.
Yes. Here, honey, let me dress you.
To talk about it in our next.
Well, that, and you also talk about the lighting, which is really responsible for the look of this film, looking like it was made in 31.
Yeah, you can't go past the credits. I just think, we wouldn't have done that to our guests. We wanted to make sure we were back into the actual movie by the time we have guests show up.
Absolutely.
So as we begin to wrap this up, before we call today done and in the books, Mike, I know you are a big fan of the classic monster movies, the Universal monster pictures, all of them. And we've mentioned them as we've gone through, not just the 4 different Frankenstein movies that have come out of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Ghost of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. This one could have, as you said earlier, could have been the 5th. How does this movie, because we asked this with all of our guests the first time they're here, how does Young Frankenstein rank in the overall pantheon of films that you like?
Oh, it's quite high. It's probably, easily, probably top 10, definitely top 20. I love this movie. In fact, it's usually one in October I try to watch a horror movie or horror comedy for Halloween. And Young Frankenstein is always one of the first ones I watch. So I watch it yearly.
When you say for Halloween, like the whole month of October?
Yeah, every night I will watch a horror movie or a horror comedy or something. And Young Frankenstein is always one of them.
It's totally appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
It belongs in there.
Oh, it does. And it is one of my favorite films of all time.
BK, I got to ask you the same question. I know you're a big fan of Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder and, of course, the genre in and of itself. How does this fit into your overall love of movies?
Probably in the top at least 20 movies, top 25, because I actually sat down one day many, many years ago and made a list of my top 100 motion pictures of all time. Now, yes, I didn't have a life growing up. I watched movies. I examined them. They were my life. They still are in a way.
Yeah, you talked me into doing it, too.
Yeah, I've seen probably close to 5,000 movies.
And that's where Alan was like, you like Kung Pao Enter the Fist?
Right,
yes, I do.
Let's see, there you go.
Well, we should be friends. Yes, we should be friends.
Looks where it got us now.
Yes.
Doing a podcast.
Boy, where did that road go awry?
Yeah. At the very least, it's one of the best comedies ever filmed in motion picture history. And I'm not a big comedy lover. I don't own a lot of comedies. in my movie library. It's not that I don't like comedies and I don't like to laugh. I just don't have a lot of comedies for some reason. I don't find myself wanting to watch them over and over. I have Young Frankenstein. I have Kung Pao, the Fist that you just talked about. But it's a fantastic movie of that genre and of the comedy genre.
Well, that kind of surprises me, knowing your sense of humor and how, I mean, you have a very rich, deep sense of humor. So that kind of surprises me that that's not on.
Because most comedies out today suck.
That is true.
That's
why
is.
we're looking at a movie from 1971 that is awesome.
Thank you, Walt.
1974.
I'll give you that check after we.
Yes. 1974.
1974.
74. Yeah.
You're getting 31 in 70. I did. Hey, you know what? I do that all the time.
Look, I'm over 50. I can barely remember my own name.
Wait, okay. I'm gonna have to bring in like the geriatric sound effect that says this total brain fart brought to you by Geritol. Geritol for old fuckers.
Well, where'd that horse come from? It worked.
Tonight's podcast brought to you by
horse works.
Centrum.
Centrum Silver.
Apparently, Walt's got the do not use brain too.
When you're old and you don't know where you're going,
Where you been?
Well,
or where you've been, listen to our podcast and take some Centrum.
That's you.
well, like this.
Somebody bathe Grandpa.
When you smell like old people.
When we get to the next minute, remind me, I've got a grandpa story that I can tell you for this next minute that's coming up. And this has been
the smell of prunes and failure.
This is the more wilder ride I've had all week.
This is a wild one.
Being here today, yes.
All right. Well, Walt, before we close things up, anything that we forgot to hit on your notes?
There's one thing that I wanted to mention, and I forgot to earlier. Hans Delbruk comes up in one other Mel Brooks movie, and that is The Producers. And it's Franz, and I kill his name.
Hans and Franz?
Yes. No. Franz, whatever his name is.
The girly man turned sideways. We don't see you no more.
Yeah, that's not a problem with me.
No.
Sorry. He didn't have to agree with you, did he?
No, he did not. I'll kill him later. So Franz sends
He doesn't want to have to do the editing.
No, well, that's true.
You got to keep me around.
You get a reprieve.
You got to take his brain to the suppository.
Yeah, that's where mine's going, the brain suppository. So, but Franz sends a Hans Delbruk a message via homing pigeon or courier pigeon. Really? So he writes out a message to Hans Delbruk, puts it on the courier pigeon, and sends it away. So again, we've got one of these weird Mel Brooks things.
Mel has a thing for Hans Delbruk.
He does.
He's got a thing for Germany in general.
Germans.
Yeah.
And he has these themes all through his movies that are, you pick them up every once in a while. You're like, wait a minute, wasn't that in, some other movie? And so
are you saying it's a Mel Brooks cinematic universe in a way?
It is.
Yeah, it could
in
be.
an odd sense.
I'm going to repeat something I said before. Are you suggesting Mel Brooks reuses some of his comedy material in other movies?
Oh, no. # Mel Brooks, please appear on our podcast. He is a genius and wonderful.
Mel Brooks, this is the James Horner of music.
# Mel Brooks, please appear on our podcast. Please ignore that last comment.
Your podcast
If that starts trending.
That's the last podcast.
That's exactly the hashtag. Mel reuses comedy bits. That starts trending. Next thing you know, we've got like we got 20th Century Fox, so lawyers down here.
Yeah.
Cease and desist this podcast immediately.
We're going to get # cease and desist.
Cease and desist.
Hey, take the press wherever you can get it.
Yeah,
Get
that's
popular
true.
with it there. It'd be great.
# I can't go back to prison.
Well, as we close out minute 41 here, we will look forward to tomorrow, where we want to continue because we ended with lab equipment, and that is exactly where we will begin tomorrow with a panning shot of the lab equipment in full use. And we will end with Dr. Frankenstein as fast as you can. And I'm not sure exactly why he's saying that. We're going to have to wait till tomorrow. Guys, you've already intimated you've got no problem coming back tomorrow, so I'm assuming we can have you back here in the same chairs, same mics for another minute.
Sure. Let me check my schedule.
Let's
No,
change
yeah, I
mics
can do
and
it.
chairs, though.
You want to swap it around?
Yeah, let's swap it around a little bit. Yeah.
All right, we can do that. We'll just eventually we can make each one gets on each microphone once.
No, they're all warm.
Yes.
I'm just glad
Hey.
nobody said # mic swapping.
We're doing a podcast, but you guys
I
are
can get
actually
behind that.
Wait. I was talking and not listening.
Well, I'm glad that was a mistake.
Whoops.
That was wise.
All right. Well, we are on a podcast that people can get anytime. It's not live, but you guys have your own radio show, BK on the Air. BK, where can people find out a little bit more about your radio show and how to hear you?
Well, they can actually hear us every Saturday from 10 a.m. till noon. That's Eastern time, depending on where you live, on WBHF Radio at WBHFradio.org. You can listen from the website, or you can listen to this live on the TuneIn app. Download the TuneIn app. Get the free one. You don't have to pay for the one that you will have commercials on and whatnot. But TuneIn, you can use that on your mobile device or your cell phone and listen to us and have fun and even call in if we're talking about something that you'd like to hear to Saturdays 10 till noon.
And Walt, where can people get more of this Wilder ride?
They can get all they want of this Wilder ride at www.thewilderride.com. There you can find us on all the different platforms where you can find podcasts and other assorted things. You can also go to our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/thewilderride. Join in with some of the conversations, ask questions, correct some of our failings, even though there's no way we missed anything, and be a part of what we're doing here.
You guys are on TuneIn as well.
We are on TuneIn.
Yeah, so
every one of your
Google
typical
Play.
podcatchers, including lately, we've added YouTube.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And hopefully by the time this comes out, the people at iHeartRadio will finally respond to the email.
Let's hope.
Until then, tomorrow, Chef Boyardee?
Frankenstein?
How would you pronounce that? Is it Chef Boyardee? I don't remember.
How do you do it German?
How do I don't know. How do you Chef Boyardee? How do you used to do it?
Meatballs.
Tomato sauce.
Mini ravioli.